If I post too much, is it going to seem like I'm bragging or showing off? How do you properly build your authority and brand so that it is based on impact and not ego? Join me this week as I chat with Rusty Shelton, Forbes book author, entrepreneur, as we talk all about building your authority so that you are viewed as a thought leader and expert in your industry. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Fanny Dunagan, and I am your host of the Creator Tips, Tools, and Tales live show. Thank you for joining us today. We have such a special guest, and I can't wait to feature him and have him share his insights and advice with you all. I do want to get to my content tip of the week here. As I do every week, I share with you a content tip to help with your brand building. So this week, I'm repeating a tip that I've shared over the course of the years that I've been doing this, but it's a tip that's worth repeating and ties in so nicely to the topic that we're going to chat about today. And it's all around the 4 purposes of content. When you're stuck for what to post on LinkedIn or any platform for that matter, remember these 4 purposes of content, and it can help jog ideas and pull up things that you can think of to post. Number 1, the first purpose of content is to educate, provide tips, advice, insights, trends, best practices, mistakes to avoid. All those things are amazing pieces of content that you can post to build your brand and to set yourself up as an authority and thought leader in your industry. So number 1, educate your audience. Number 2, the second purpose is to inform. Share with people trainings that you're giving, webinars, presentations, conferences you're attending, networking events that you're involved in. Inform your audience of happenings and events around your community and share with them, and tie that into the industry that you're in. The third purpose of content is to inspire. Be sure to share the soft side of content, a quote that pulls you up on a rainy day, a story that you want to share about a challenge you had and the lesson you learned from it and the things that you gained from it. Inspirational posts touch people's hearts, and it's a great way to connect with your audience. And then the fourth purpose of content is to entertain. Entertain people with your interests, your hobbies. Tie that in with your career. Tie that in with a story that's happened in your professional life. And that's a great way to make people laugh, smile, feel something again, and bring joy to them. So in summary, those are the 4 purposes of content when you're trying to think of something to post: educate, inform, inspire, and entertain. I hope that was useful to you. And there you go. I see more and more people joining us, and I know it's because this topic is so valuable and important. So let's get to the star of the show here. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Rusty Shelton to the show. Hi, Rusty. How are you?
Hey, Fanny, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You have all these people coming in to tune in
I
to
know, it's
watch.
such a good group.
Yes. So before we begin, I do want to read to everyone Rusty's bio here. Rusty Shelton first spoke at Harvard on the changing world of PR and marketing at the age of 23. He is a best-selling author, dynamic keynote speaker, and a successful entrepreneur. He has focused his career on helping leaders build thought leadership, focused on impact, not ego, writing 3 acclaimed books, and speaking around the world to audiences ranging from YPO to Harvard Medical School. He is the founder and chairman of Zilker Media in Austin, and senior marketing strategist at Forbes Books, and a proud member of EO. And Rusty, what a resume. What a
Oh, well,
bio.
thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm just super excited about this afternoon. I appreciate everybody joining us, and I know both Fanny and I take this really seriously. We want to try to give a ton of value in the next hour.
100%. So while I pull up your website, everybody, I want you to be sure to jot down rustyshelton.com and look him up on LinkedIn as well. Rusty, tell me, how did you end up here? How did you end up in this passion of yours around authority marketing and being able to speak at the age of 23 at Harvard? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, first of all, I went to University of Texas. I see a lot of Texas folks on, so hook 'em. But had a great time there. Sophomore year when I was at UT, I did an internship at a book PR agency here in Austin, Texas, and absolutely loved the experience. I love the process around inspiring people, giving value with books, and so spent some time there. And when I graduated, I got hired full time at that agency. Spent the first 7 years of my career at that book PR agency, and during that time, if you think back, that was 2003 to 2010. We were just doing PR, and so one of the things I started to notice is a lot of the authors that we were working with, getting PR was great, but if they didn't have their brand on point, if they weren't approaching social media the right way, they weren't getting near the value that they should have been getting from it. And so what I decided in 2010, after talking myself out of it for a couple of years, I finally got up the courage to start my first agency. And my first agency was Shelton Interactive. And the idea around that agency was to pull all of the services that an author would need under one roof. So typically at that time, Fanny, if you were an author, you had to hire your book PR firm, you had to find a website company, you had to go find a social media agency, and really all of that, in my view, needed to be handled under one roof. And so started that agency, Shelton Interactive. That was an agency that we grew from 2010 to 2016. We did 35 New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestsellers, learned a ton about how to build thought leadership. And we were fortunate enough to get acquired in 2016 by Advantage Media Group Forbes Books, who I still am really proud to do a lot of work with today. And with the new agency.
Oh, whoops. We lost Rusty's feed. Oh, there he is. Come on back.
Sorry about that. So essentially the idea with Zilker, and more broadly what we're going to talk about today with authority marketing, is let's take everything that we used to apply to authors in terms of building thought leadership, and let's actually apply it to leaders, with the understanding that for most of you here today, the quickest way to establish trust with your audience, the best way to make an impact is actually to lead as somebody with something to teach rather than a business with something to sell.
Absolutely. You see, you have a fellow mustache. Love your mustache. Is that for Movember, Rusty? There you go.
Brian, I was
telling
Fanny this earlier. So I grew it out for a Halloween costume, Ted Lasso, and I have two sons that are 13 and 15, and they dared me to try to keep it for the whole week. And so here we are sort of towards the tail end of that week. And I don't know, I think my wife is not real happy about it, but I'm having fun with it with the boys for sure.
There you go. And some local alum, hook 'em, Rusty,
Hook 'em,
from
Patty.
fellow Longhorn. So I think my audience is probably, I'd say, half entrepreneurs, half corporate professionals, right? And obviously it's important to build brand as an entrepreneur. You're trying to build your business, get yourself out there. But why is it important to build brand as a corporate professional? Because you have a job already. Why bother? Why make the extra effort?
Well, I think your brand matters no matter who you are. I mean, the reality is today the first place that most people get an introduction to you. It doesn't happen in person. It doesn't happen over the phone. It happens online, page one of Google. And from there, if you're lucky, on your LinkedIn profile, on your website. And kind of the crazy thing about that is this is even true when we're meeting somebody in person, right? If you think about it, if I'm gotten connected to another leader here in Austin, I'm going to have coffee with them. What am I doing in my truck before I walk in the door, right? I'm doing a quick Google search on their name. And that first impression that I get in my truck before I walk in the door essentially is going to be an impression that's tough for them to change over the next hour that I spend with them. And so the reality is, whether you're running a business, whether you are working in a business, et cetera, your personal brand, the first impression that people get of you is something that, number one, we want you to own, but number two, we want you to be intentional about that brand. Because Fanny, as you know, no matter where you might go in the future, if you happen to start your own business, if you happen to go to a new company, you bring a lot more leverage and a lot more value to that company when you have built an audience that, you know, is looking to you again as somebody they can learn from, versus where most people sort of stay, which is a bit more of a commoditized, you know, kind of operator sort of persona, which I don't think serves most people well.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, in a way, nowadays we Google everything before we buy. We research online, we look people up, and like you said, and even, you know, for everyone there, I do want to bring up like this book, right? Authority Marketing. You wrote this, was it 2015, right?
It was 2016.
2016. So that is 6 years ago. And I only stumbled upon it this year because, speaking of which, I want to shout out to Natasha Wallstrad. I don't know if she's in here. She's with Forbes Books. She sent me this book because we happened to get on a phone call together and started chatting. And she, you know, wanted me to have this book. And so I started reading it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is everything that I believe in and preach. And like, it's still relevant 6 years later, right? Why is that? Why do you think it's still so prevalent?
Well, I think it's more relevant today than it was when the book came out. I mean, the reality is, so Gallup put out a study this summer, and what they shared was, right now on record, it is the absolute lowest percentage of people that trust institutions than there's ever been. And so the challenge for most entrepreneurs, for most leaders, you know, most of us are conditioned, when we think about branding, we're typically conditioned to put all of our eggs in the business brand basket. In other words, focus only on the company, only on the corporate logo. And we got two big challenges with that today. Number one, your target audience is more skeptical, is more distrustful than they've ever been of institutions, of businesses. When I hear from your company, you know, my guard is up. I'm expecting, all right, this is a company marketing to me, et cetera. The
sales pitch.
Right. I mean, if I get an email from your company and the delivery is coming from your company, I cannot delete that thing quickly enough. Because again, my perception is, okay, they're marketing to me. The second big challenge, and this is especially true, Fanny, when we're talking to people that are working for small businesses or companies that are kind of on their way up, when you lead with your corporate brand, you're going head to head against corporate brands that have been around a lot longer than you have, probably have marketing budgets that are dramatically higher than yours. It's just a fight you're not going to win. It takes a lot more impressions and a lot more time to build trust with an audience when you go that direction. And so part of what we advocate for, and part of what I want to really just encourage everybody that's on the LinkedIn Live today is, when you shift the way that you are positioned. So again, most leaders are taking a significant backseat to the business. My encouragement to everybody that's here today is, you want to step out alongside the business, not instead of the company. Sorry, Fanny, if your company is the interstate, we want as many of the right people on that interstate as we can get, the right talent, the right clients, the right partners. I need you to be an on-ramp back to that interstate, because again, the speed to trust for you as an individual, this is true whether you're a salesperson, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a member of a team, the speed to trust for you as an individual is dramatically quicker than it is for your company. And so part of what
100%.
I just want to encourage people to think about is, all right, if right now you're taking a significant backseat to the business brand and you're spending any money advertising, marketing, where you're leading with the corporate logo, you're really getting a lot less value from that spend than you should be if you shift towards some of the things that Fanny and I are going to talk about today.
100%. Yeah, John Ballard in the comments just reiterates, people do business with people who make them feel trust. And when we build our brand, people get to know, like, and trust us, right?
Right.
And I love this quote from your book: a personal brand accelerates trust, right? It's like on speed, right? Like you were saying, that on-ramp and on that highway.
Yeah, it is. And Fanny, I think it's important for people to understand, first of all, just as we sort of dive in on how do you build trust, is what is branding? What does it mean? And I think for a lot of people, when they hear that term, we think logos or positioning, et cetera. Branding is a really simple thing. Branding is creating an image in the minds of your audience. All right. And in today's landscape, there are two really distinct phases to creating that image in the minds of your audience. So phase one is what we think of as pre-engagement. All right. So phase one is before you and I meet in person. It's before I buy a product or service from you. It's before I join your team as a team member. It's before we work together. And so in phase one, because the image you create in my mind, is not created in person, it's not created as a result of over delivering on my expectations. In phase one, the image is created page one of Google, right? From there, if we're lucky, it's then created on your website, on your LinkedIn profile. And that initial image is either an image that's congruent, right, with what I'm going to get once I cross over and decide to buy from you, or decide to take that interview, or decide to move forward, or it's an image that's either, non-existent because I can't find you, even though I know your name, or if I can find you, maybe it doesn't really do anything to differentiate you from all the other options that I have in your space. So I want to spend most of our time during the webinar today in phase one. Phase two is post-engagement. So this is once I cross over and become a customer, once we work together, once I accept that job on your team. And the image you create in my mind in phase two is connected back to the answer to one really simple question. Right? Is, did you over-deliver on my expectations as a customer, as a team member, as a partner, or did you under-deliver? And this is true, by the way, any brand we do business with. There's a phase one that gets us in the door to the new restaurant down the street, or to hop on with Fanny and I this afternoon. The ultimate image in your mind when we wrap up today, of course, is dependent on, all right, did Rusty and Fanny over-deliver on whatever I was expecting, or did they under-deliver? I'm going to assume and sort of leave it to you that operationally you're going to over-deliver in phase two. What I want you to think about is, if I have been referred to you, if I go looking for you by name, number one, can you be found? And then number two, what image are you creating? So Fanny, I think for a lot of leaders, for a lot of professionals that I talk to, they are killing it in phase two. They're over delivering. They're the best kept secret in their space, et cetera. And part of what I just want to really kind of grab people by the shoulders and sort of shake them around is, all right, you're doing that in phase two. Unfortunately, the impact that you're making is limited to the people that get in direct contact with you in the boardroom, working with you. And so part of what we want to encourage is, let's move it upstream at a bit more scale to expand the impact, but also to build trust before you get in the room with somebody.
I love that. Yeah, because post-engagement, at the end of the day, you're only going to get new business from referrals, right? Because only that small group knows about you. Whereas this pre-engagement, you can't be found if you don't have a brand, right?
Right. And I think the other thing, Fanny, is I hear from a lot of people like, listen, my business is entirely referral driven. That's all I want. I don't have to think about branding or my personal brand. But the reality is, Fanny, if I get referred to somebody by name, it's not like I'm immediately picking up the phone. I'm going to kick the tires on who that person is, right? Because I probably got 3 or 4 other
You're going to collect evidence.
Referrals, right? And so what a lot of people discount is, you actually are probably getting a lot of referrals right now that you're never hearing from, because they can't find you, even though they know your name. Or if they can find you, again, maybe what they find doesn't inspire a whole lot of trust that makes them want to pick up that phone. And so Fanny, what I find a lot of times is, just getting intentional about your brand actually encourages more referrals because it validates the decision that somebody made to work with you. It makes them look good to have that referral.
I love that. So let's do this. Let's poll our audience, Rusty. Okay. On a scale, let's do this. On a scale of 1 to 5 or 0 to 5. Actually, it's not 0 because you're here. The audience members are here for a reason. Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 meaning you are super, super serious about building your brand and you are purposeful, intentional about it. And 1 being, you're just kind of here to listen, not sure, not convinced yet of what to do. Let me know, let Rusty know on a scale of 1 to 5, how serious are you about building your brand? And drop that into the comments below. I'm very, very curious about this answer. And while they're doing that, Rusty, you talk about how everybody needs an online brand audit. What do you mean by that?
All right. So this, I think, is maybe the most important thing we're going to talk about today. And I want you to sort of put yourself in the shoes of somebody that has been referred to you. So let's say that I've been referred to you by name. I didn't get your email address. All I have is your name. When I go to Google and pop your name in right now, the first question that I want you to ask yourself is, number 1, can you be found? Okay. If the answer to that is no, there are one of 2 reasons why. Either you've just intentionally been a ghost online up to this point, and if so, okay, we're going to try to talk you out of that going forward. The much more common reason that I see, though, Fanny, why I can't find you is either you have a name that is exceedingly common. So in other words, you share your name with a ton of other people that have the exact same name, and so I can't find you, or you have a really unique name and you're unlucky enough to share it with an axe murderer from the 70s or an Olympian or somebody that's just super visible online. And so part of what I want people to think about here, your name is like a piece of digital real estate. All right. And my favorite example of this is one of my favorite PR and marketing authors, a guy named David Meerman Scott. His name's David Scott. And what he recognized early in his career was David Scott, as a piece of digital real estate, was a super crowded piece of real estate. There were a lot of other David Scotts there. And if he wanted to generate referrals, he was going to have a really tough time building the tallest tower of visibility. And so part of what I want people to think about here with David, when he added that middle name, so David Meerman Scott, what he essentially did is he walked across the street to a piece of real estate that was completely empty. And with the first brick he laid in his foundation, he owned search around his name. And so for those of you who are on here, and by the way, I've seen several of you, if you have a really common name, one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to think about, does it make sense to change your name? In other words, does it make sense to add a middle initial or a middle name to your brand name for ease of search? So in other words, those of you who are here in Texas, the guy that spends more money in the state of Texas on advertising than I've ever seen before is a guy named Thomas J. Henry, right? So Thomas Henry is a very high profile spirits brand from Europe. And they recognized early on that he was not going to own search around that. So they added the middle initial, and he owned search in a similar way that David Meerman Scott did. So everybody who's on here today, I want you to do that online brand audit. And number 1, like before we even worry about what image are we creating, if I know your name, can I even find you? And if the answer to that is no, for many of you, you are spinning your wheels on a brand name or a piece of real estate that unfortunately you're really never going to own in terms of discoverability. And so everybody who's on here today, if you don't own your name as a piece of real estate, first name, last name.com, when we wrap up today, go to GoDaddy and grab it. While you're there, get your kids' names, get your grandkids' names. That real estate's valuable today. It's only going to get more valuable in the future. Brian, one of the things I would encourage you to think about is maybe a middle initial as well. So if your name is taken or if you don't own search for it, check out the middle initial. If that's available, my encouragement is grab that. And again, this sounds so in the weeds, I know, to many of you, but foundationally, like,
so important.
Before we worry about the image, you got to make sure that as people are getting referred to you, as they hear your name, that they can actually find you. And so if you do make that change, Fanny, I do encourage people, like, that's your name, full stop. In other words, that's on your business card, that's on your LinkedIn, that's how you're introduced on stage, etc. Put all of those bricks on one piece of real estate. I find some people will scatter it across a lot of pieces of real estate with different versions of their name. So we can talk more about the image that's created, but let me pause there, Fanny, because I think discoverability, a lot of people jump right to, all right, what should my website look like? Or what can my content strategy be? And they don't actually have a brand name that they can own.
I love that. And it's ironically, it wasn't until I read your book that I went and registered my name and grabbed it. I mean, there's nothing on it.
Love it.
I just tied it to my existing company name. But I wanted to see if I pass your test, because I did Google my name, Rusty. Okay, so I'm going to pull it up. Oh, you did?
I did.
Okay, let's see what the expert says. You being the expert here. I Googled my name, and I think luckily, let me make this big here. Number one, and this for everyone that's tuning in from LinkedIn as well. Even if you don't have a domain name for your name, your LinkedIn profile is usually the top 3 to 5 search result.
Yep.
And so, yeah. Okay.
And for
so
almost,
did I pass?
You did mostly, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the weeds of that. But yeah, for most people here, where do you register your name, Patty? You just go to GoDaddy.com. I think is the easiest place to do that. For most of you, if I'm able to find you, your LinkedIn is going to be the first thing that comes up, similar to Fanny.
Yes.
Great. Fantastic. The second question that I want you to ask yourself is, all right, cool. I found your LinkedIn or I found your bio page on your website. What image are you then creating in somebody's minds once I get there?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we have to keep in mind in phase 1, again, I've been referred to you by name. So when I get to Fanny's LinkedIn, for example, or if I get to somebody else's LinkedIn, when I get there, there's no image yet in my mind for that person, right? It's the very first time I'm coming in contact with them. And so what I find so common and such a missed opportunity is most people, if you think about that header image on LinkedIn, like most people that I see are leading with a generic corporate logo, or you're giving me like a Port Aransas sunset, or you're giving me some generic quote. And the missed opportunity there, it's not that it's a bad image or you're creating something negative, but what you're doing is you're missing a golden opportunity to create an image that positions you not as just another operator, but instead as that authority with something to teach. So instead, we often talk about in phase 1, the single most important principle that exists in terms of building trust with somebody that doesn't yet know you is the principle of authority by association. So in other words, I get to that LinkedIn, there's no image in my mind yet for Fanny, right? Very first time she and I are coming in contact. If instead of what we have right now, if there was an image in that header area where Fanny's up on stage and we've got an SMU logo behind her, or we've got a Forbes logo. In other words, I don't know Fanny, but I do have an image in my mind for somebody that's on a stage like that, next to a logo like that. And so what happens there is an acceleration of trust. And so what I would encourage each of you to think about is sort of going back across, your career as you think about where you are today. What I want to focus in on with your brand is walking a very fine line. Okay. So essentially on one side of the coin, I want the visuals to say what I don't want you to say about yourself, which is top of her category thought leader, main stage speaker, quoted by the media. In other words, authority, thought leader. And then the flip side, the entirety of your content strategy from LinkedIn Live to podcasts to blogs and beyond is all mission-driven thought leadership. If you never take another step with me, I'm going to leave you better off as a result of watching a LinkedIn Live like this or reading a blog. But the reality is your audience is not interested in reading what you've written until they recognize you're the person to teach them on this topic. And so Fanny, I think this is really just such an important point because for a lot of people, they lead with, the suit and tie headshot and, the generic corporate logo and, here's all the stuff. And you are the most commoditized image that exists when you do that. And so instead, we want to walk that fine line. This is not about you being the message. I need you to be the messenger. And the only way you can be the messenger to make that impact is people have to trust that you're the person to teach them. And so we can talk in a little bit more detail about that, but that's really kind of the foundation of this is with that online brand audit, can you be found? Once I do find you, if I land on that corporate website, are you hitting me over the head with stock photos and generic text, or are you building trust by associating yourself with brands that your audience already knows, trusts, and respects? And that's how you build trust before you meet somebody.
There you go, folks. Golden nuggets right there. Harish has a question, and please feel free to drop your questions in the comments so that I can bring it up and share it with Rusty. He says, how can someone get 2 to 5, top 2 to 5 of the top results to be their name, not just one entry? Or how do they get their image to appear more often? So frequency of appearance, right?
Well, Harish, first of all, thanks for the question. I think the key thing here early on for some of you that are coming in, it's like, all right, I'd never even thought about online brand audit. And maybe the only thing comes up right now is that LinkedIn profile. One of the quickest way to get a few search results up there is, to go ahead and grab a Twitter account, for example, or go ahead and get that website going. In other words, give yourself a couple of early results by having those properties. The other thing I would want you to think about is, do you have a name right now where there's not a whole lot of search competition? In other words, how realistic is it for you to own search around your name? The second level of this is starting to get a bit more visible. So in other words, doing interviews or starting to get a little bit of media. And I know for many of you, probably the response to that is, yeah, Rusty, I'd love to do more of that. I haven't worked with a PR firm. Maybe I haven't done much of that yet. There are a few ways to self-generate PR. So help a reporter, quoted. There's a few others like that. But I think one of the biggest things early on is make sure you have a name you can own. And then in addition to LinkedIn, let's look at Twitter, maybe a YouTube channel, and a home-based website for most of you is a really good starting point.
And look at that. You're already converting and making an impact.
Awesome.
Ilya,
Good.
My PowerPoint presentation designer. He, by the way, if you ever need a PowerPoint presentation designer, Ilya's the guy. Great idea to have a landing page for your personal name. I like that idea. Take action. Grab it, Ilya. And Corrine asks, as a coach, should testimonials be on the name domain?
Yeah, so Corinne, I think, in terms of should they be on the website? Yeah, absolutely. I think that they should. What I have found though is a lot of people will spend a lot of time just featuring testimonials from kind of generic, Steve T, for example, or in other words, just somebody that nobody knows yet. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but on that website, you want to lean into brands, ideally that your audience knows, trusts, and respects. And again, if you don't have the awards yet, or you don't have the PR yet, let's do that with visuals. Let's get a stage picture of you. Let's put you in a setting that connotes authority. And I think for many of you, again, this is just back to that balance. Your audience has to perceive that you are somebody that can teach them something, that you're somebody that is going to help them solve a problem. And the only way they get to your actual content, which is where I know for many of you want to make the impact, is they've got to recognize you're the person to teach them on this topic. And so again, that's why you got to have both sides of that coin.
Yeah. Well, and a great quote that I love from your book, again, shout out, Authority Marketing. Rusty's not paying me to do this, by the way.
Well,
I just love the book so much. Prescribing solutions instead of selling services. That's when I highlighted that quote in the book. Explain more about that. And I think it ties in so nicely to this.
Well, yeah, I mean, this for every single one of you, let's take, Ilya, who it sounds like designs unbelievable PowerPoint presentations. There's a ton of people that are trying to figure out, how do I get in a better spot with my PowerPoint presentation? And so there's a lot of companies competing in that space. But, if Ilya leans into that in terms of teaching there, he prescribes in a way that somebody that learns it figures out, okay, I could do this myself, maybe, but I probably don't have the design skills, or I probably don't have the knowledge. And so I want to work with him, because instead of just being a corporate logo, one of many, I trust him, because not only has he taught me something, I get a sense that he's a real person. He's woven in a few other things. And so I think that's the other thing. And I think it's important on this, Fanny, is a lot of people have the mistaken belief that when we talk about, all right, position yourself as an authority or a thought leader with something to teach, I'm not advocating that you play this like formal, hey, I'm the thought leader kind of role. Actually, I want you to be more of yourself as opposed to less of yourself. In other words, what makes many of you come back for each LinkedIn Live that Fanny has is not the guest. I mean, the guest hopefully is bringing a ton of content, but you trust Fanny to bring not only her insight, but the personality, and she's endeared herself to a point that it's just fun to follow that. And so for me, I talk a lot about thought leadership. I talk a lot about marketing. I also whine quite a bit about the Texas Longhorns football team. I talk about coaching my sons. I talk about, so other stuff that you weave in alongside that makes it more authentic. It also makes it more fun. And so I think it's important to mention, Fanny, it's not just about kind of the trust or the credibility. It's also about just being willing to give value and teach and just be yourself.
Absolutely. And I want to get to a question here about the 4 pillars of authority, but I want to set it up with this question that we got in the audience, because I think it ties in together. Freddie asked, what would you say would be an associated cost to true personal branding? It can be expensive to put yourself out there in the hopes of landing gigs on credibility as far as increasing visibility. And in a way, like the topic of today, was build your authority based on impact, not ego, because there is a misconception that, I'm going to be bragging, or I'm
Sure.
showing off and all that, right? But in your book, you talk about the 4 pillars of authority. So let's dive deeper into that and tell people what that is.
Sure. So the 4 pillars of authority: branding and omnipresence, content marketing, PR and media, and speaking. Those are the 4 things that we see really level up somebody just to be positioned as an authority. And I want to spend a few minutes on content strategy, because I know for many of you, I've seen a couple of comments here around how important it is to know your audience, which is exactly right, how important it is to serve your audience. And what I find from a lot of kind of well-meaning would-be thought leaders, when they think about content strategy, their minds immediately go to the where of content. In other words, all right, Rusty, should I start a podcast, or is it LinkedIn, or is it TikTok? And the much more important question is not the where, it's the what. What kind of content is your audience looking for? What are the things that are going to serve them best? And so the analogy I like to use for content strategy, I want you to think about your content strategy almost like it's your personal newspaper. All right. And again, the mistake I see a lot of people make is usually the tendency is, let me fill that newspaper with op-eds or opinion pieces, meaning it's the Rusty Shelton show again and again and again and again. And we have 2 problems with that. Number 1, you're going to get bored on me pretty quick if all you're serving up is your own stuff. Number 2, if you're starting off with a smaller audience, we don't have enough people yet that know to pay attention to just your stuff. So it's a slow grind in terms of growth. And so what I would recommend for each of you, when you think about a content strategy, I want you to have 3 categories of content that you evenly split content into. So category number 1 is what we call you-driven content, Y-O-U, you-driven content. So you-driven content connects back to your intellectual property. So in other words, your perspective on what it means to be a better leader, whatever your area of expertise is, this is where you're teaching people. This category is also your personal journey. So your lessons learned along the way, the more vulnerable, the more self-deprecating that you're willing to be, the better this content's going to perform. If you're going to teach me a lesson, take me to the biggest, flat on your face mistake you ever made with that issue, and then work me back to the aha. Fanny, in my experience, most people, the tendency is to do this first category at like 90-95% of what people put out. So I want to recommend 1/3. Category 2 is news-driven content. Back to David Meerman Scott coined a term called newsjacking. This is taking what's in the broader news cycle. It's what your audience is paying attention to. They're anxious about it. Maybe they're excited. They're giving it their attention. In this category, I don't need you to report the news. Thankfully, there's lots of people doing that. What I do want you to do is provide analysis for your audience on that topic area. So think about what's front of mind for your audience, and then work back and provide analysis for them. This works really well for email newsletters. If you serve me up an email newsletter that's evergreen, I'm probably not opening it. If it's super topical, I'm much more likely to lean into that. The third category, which is the one that I think is really the biggest opportunity for most people that are on this session today, is relationship-driven content. So our favorite way to use content marketing is to use it as an excuse for you to reach out to people that we want you to build a relationship with, or involve people, that have a story that you think needs to be told. So in other words, what I have a lot of people do is sit down and think about, okay, over the course of the next 5 years, who are the 50 people that are the most important relationships for the growth of my business, for the impact I want to make? Once you have that list, probably half of it are people that already know and love you. So they're people, maybe they're already doing business with you, they're already referring. And maybe half of that list are wish lists, kind of target clients, target relationships. What we want you to do at that point is work backwards from that list with your content strategy. So in other words, instead of you just sitting down and sharing your stuff, think about a podcast as a way to facilitate peer-to-peer interactions with people that you want to build a relationship with. So I've seen that be really, really effective, Fanny, where somebody can use a podcast or a blog or an interview series as a way to kind of curate content from other people that can bring their audience to the table. And I've seen that work really well.
Kind of like this.
Kind of like this, exactly.
I want to pull up this question from Brian. It's a brilliant question. What do you think is the ultimate measurement or KPI to measure personal branding success, Rusty?
Well, so this is a caveat, but I think this is different based on what somebody is looking to achieve. So Brian, that's not meant to be a cop-out in any way, but what I'll focus in on here is I do not think it is followers, size of your email list, volume, all of that stuff can be bought, and there are a lot of ways to get to that. What I would say is the most important KPI for most of the clients we work with is, number one, is this driving trust that is allowing us to increase lead flow? Is it also increasing our conversion rate for the leads that we do have based on the trust that we're building with somebody? The biggest thing, though, that I'm seeing right now, Brian, for a lot of leaders and CEOs that I talk to is the ability to attract and retain talent, in particular as you get toward either really small businesses where you're competing against much bigger ones, and the way you're attracting talent is because you're building trust in a way that they're not, or for much larger businesses, for leaders that don't have the ability to one-on-one connect with a lot of their team. The more visible the leader is, the more willing they are to put themselves out there. They build a lot of trust at scale with a team that wouldn't otherwise have a chance to interact with them. And so I don't think it's follower count. I don't think it's the size of the email list. All those things are great and important, but it is really looking at what is the single most important thing for you to drive. Is it talent acquisition? Is it client development? Is it speaking engagements? And then let's work backwards from that and thinking about, all right, who's your 50? What are the right PR targets to focus in on?
Wow. My brain is like just popping off here. What about this question right here, Corrine? Have you seen specific mistakes in building trust? What mistakes are you seeing?
Well, I see a lot of people that, again, when we sort of think about this idea of building a personal brand, for a lot of leaders, it's like a recoil phrase. In other words, usually when I'm giving a speech and I mention that, I either see like people sit back in the audience and kind of cross their arms, or there's a visible grimace. And the reason why, Corinne, is, most people that we think about who are focusing in on this, unfortunately, are building things that come across as kind of ego-driven, hey, look at me sort of brands. And so I would say that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see is somebody that goes into this and creates something that is like, hey, let me tell you just how smart I am, and let me go through all the stuff that I know, as opposed to kind of the mindset that Fanny was talking about around 4 purposes of content. you're really trying to serve and inspire people. And so when you go into it authentically and not sort of trying to play this role or sort of create something that's not authentic to you, but when you go into it authentically, but also recognize third-party credibility and how important it is, that's where I see people win. And in my experience, again, going back to for many of you, the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to growing your business or driving results is not reaching people that have never heard of you before directly. That takes a lot of money and a lot of time. The best way to get to new clients is to empower the people that already know and love you to talk about you in a way that they're winning as they do it.
Whoa. So say that again, Rusty. That's golden.
Well, so in my experience, the best way to reach your target audience is not to try to go directly to them with ads, etc. The best way to get to them is to empower the people that know and love you already to talk about what you're doing. Let me give you a quick example of that. So I went up to Detroit a couple of years ago to give a speech to a group of dentists up there. As a client, an orthodontist, Dr. Jamie Reynolds, who was putting on this event. And on the way to the venue, he stopped by his new practice location. When I walked in the door, it's all the normal stuff you'd expect from a modern orthodontics practice. You had the iPads, you had the cool design, etc. The thing that caught my eye, there's this huge gold gong that was right in the middle of the exam room with all the chairs. Like, Dr. Reynolds, what's the deal with this? And he said, hey, just like most orthodontics practices, we're driven almost entirely by referrals. What most people do is, teenager gets their braces off, parent goes up to the front desk to pay the final bill, and the front desk clerk is kind of trained to put a couple postcards up there. Hey, do you know any other parents that are thinking about putting braces on? We're driven by referral, right? Super awkward for everybody involved in that conversation. So what Dr. Reynolds and his team did is they sort of mapped out the patient experience. At what point is our client the most ecstatic about the job we've done? And of course, it's obvious for them, right? It's when the braces come off. And so what they do in his practice, when somebody gets the braces off, everybody in the practice stops what they're doing. It could be mid-exam, they're going to stop. Teenager goes up, bangs the gong, everybody claps. And of course, the mom can't get that video on Instagram quickly enough, or that video on Facebook quickly enough. And when she shares it, she's waxing on about her experience with Dr. Reynolds. And so what they've done is basically empower people that already know and love them to talk about them in a way that that person's winning as they do it. And so back to what I talked about with relationship-driven content, you're a bank and you have a podcast studio in your bank branch, and you invite customers and potential customers to come in and do podcast interviews, or you're a coffee shop and you've got an Instagram wall that is cool enough that people want to take pictures and push those out, and they feel like they're winning as they do it. Those are the things that I want you to think about with your content strategy: is how do I involve other people authentically in a way that just basically empowers them to refer in a way that they're winning as they do it.
And you're almost creating an experience too, right?
Yes.
It's the experience. In the example of the dentist, there's people cheering, there's a gong, there's and I can't help as a mom to take a photo. And then of course I'm going to post the photo or the video. And suddenly it's this whole experience. And then out it goes into the digital world to be shared.
Right. And it's fun. It just creates a win-win for everybody involved. And
Brilliant.
So that's where,
brilliant idea.
Again, for many of you, the funnest way to do content is not just to sit back and teach, but it's to involve other people with, with what you're doing.
Harish has a great question here. For a small business, should the founder push a personal brand agenda or a company brand? At what point should the founder push the company brand?
So, Harish, the best way to punch above your weight class in terms of visibility is not to lead with the company brand. It's to lead with your personal brand. In other words, that authority brand. What I find for most people, and this really comes down to, are you building kind of a solo shop, or are you really looking to build a bigger business? For most founders that are looking to build a bigger business, it typically makes sense to have both at the start. And the reason I say both is that corporate website is not one you need to spend a ton of money on, or in most cases, spend a ton of money on or spend a lot of time on the marketing side, but you want to have it there, again, as a foundation to start building the company. But where you're going to punch above your weight class, again, is you earning it, you earning impressions, you teaching, you giving value. Because again, anytime somebody hears from your company, their guard is up. I see so many founders that are looking to speak and looking to do more media. And the link that goes over to the conference is, their bio page on a corporate website.
Oh, okay. We'll just wait for Rusty to come back. I think it's just a wonky connection.
Sorry, Fanny. I don't know where I hopped off there, but what I wanted to say there is I see so many founders who are looking to drive speaking or drive PR. If you put yourself in the shoes of that meeting planner, if the link I'm getting from your pitch is your bio page within a corporate website, I am forwarding you to my sponsorship committee to see if we can sell you a table in the sponsorship room, versus if the link I get, Harish, is a home-based website for you. And when I get there, I'm seeing, wow, main stage speaker, the authority on the top, that there's a different thing that happens there. And so that's really, from my perspective, what I'm trying to advocate for everybody here is, whether we like it or not, whether the phrase personal branding turns your stomach or not, people are getting the first impression of you on page 1 of Google. And if it's happening whether you like it or not, my wholehearted encouragement to you is own that first impression. Don't let your company own it. Don't let somebody else own it. You own it. And then number 2, be really intentional about the image that you want to create in somebody's minds. And for many of you, there are a lot of places I can get a PowerPoint slide design. There are a lot of places where I can put braces on my child. What differentiates one person from the next is the amount of trust that they can build when I'm doing initial research. And again, you're going to do that in a much better way when you lead as somebody with something to teach.
Wow. Okay. I'm conscious of the time, so I really want to go back to the pillars of authority, because I think that's the whole foundation, right, of your book here. You mentioned the 4 pillars of authority. Can we go through each one of them real quick for the audience here, because they're so important? Number 1, pillars of authority, everyone: branding and omnipresence. What do you mean by that?
So this is, are you creating an image in somebody's mind? This is discoverability. I've been referred to you. Can I find you? And then once I find you, are you creating an image in my mind that accelerates me based on the trust you've created to raise my hand and take a next step? Or is it throwing some sand in the gears? Omnipresence is, once that brand is created, you start to become more and more visible, not just on your website, but also across rented media as well as earned media.
Got it. Content marketing.
Content marketing. This is the fun stuff, in my opinion. And this is where a lot of people want to jump to is, all right, I want to start that podcast, or I want to start blogging for Forbes or whatever else. But if you don't have the brand right, you're kind of spinning your wheels with the stuff that you're creating. And so content marketing, once you have the brand right, becomes I'm sorry, y'all, for whatever's happening on the connection here and there. But once you get that brand right, then you're actually able to see value from the content that you create. So I see a lot of people that jump right to the content. They're generating the impressions, but when I go and look for that person, I either can't find them or there's not a next step. So don't jump right to the fun stuff until you have the brand right.
Got it. And then this part for me, selfishly and personally, is tough, like PR and media. Do you really need an outside agency to get into PR and media? Can a small business owner do it on their own without an agency for something like this?
Absolutely, they can. There are lots of people that do this on their own. So that's where you get into services like Help a Reporter or Quoted. When I talked earlier, Fanny, about the importance of news-driven content, there are a lot of journalists right now when they're
Thank you for everyone's patience as we kind of navigate the live.
So just back to PR media, there's plenty of ways to self-generate. And what I find from people that are willing to create news-driven content is you kind of widen your net to catch inbound PR queries as well. And so I think that can be really valuable.
What do you mean by widening your net?
Well, we're finding for a lot of journalists right now, when they're looking for an expert, if they're on deadline and they need an expert on whatever the topic is, they're going to Google increasingly. And so when they type in looking for an expert, somebody that's talking about that topic, I've got story after story of people that have gotten national media as a result of writing a really topical blog post that caught the attention of a journalist. When you hire a good PR firm, what you are paying for are their relationships and their expertise to do this quickly and at a large scale, but we know not everybody can afford that. And so for many of you that are just getting started, there are lots of great ways to self-generate PR. And in the book that we're going to give out to anybody that wants it today, I'll talk in a lot more detail about how to do that.
Yeah, awesome. And then the fourth pillar, speaking.
So I'm partial to this because this is my favorite way to teach. I love to speak to groups. And what I find for a lot of leaders, this becomes just a fantastic way, again, to position yourself as that person with something to teach. And so for many of you, one of the big things that I want you to think about, if you have a speaking engagement coming up, or if you've done speaking in the past, think about right now, are you positioned as a speaker? So in other words, again, when I get to your LinkedIn profile, few things matter more in terms of building trust than me seeing you in a setting, again, that connotes authority. And so those of you who have spoken and maybe you haven't gotten great pictures before, the best $300 you're going to spend over the next year is the $300 you spend on a photographer to have at that next speaking engagement and get some great pictures there.
Awesome. Now, another thing, obviously, is we have a book, right? Like, so as far as a book, I'm very, very curious because I've been like trying to think, is it worth writing a book? Is it worth, going down that route? Tell us about that. Obviously, this book led me to you.
Yeah. So we view books as a force multiplier for people. And it is one of the biggest foundations to building authority, is somebody that gets to that website or walks in the door to your office and you can hand them a copy of your book. Whether they ever open it or not, there is just an impression that happens there when you see, okay, Fanny wrote the book on it. Now, I am not a fan. There's a lot of people that are fans of just like books as business cards. I am not a fan of that at all, because I think in many cases, if you're doing a book as a brochure, it doesn't reflect well on any expertise. And so you want the book to be good. You want the book to actually provide value to your audience. But if you can do that, it becomes just a real good way, and kind of what I find is the quickest force multiplier to shift the way the market looks at you. As that expert, she wrote the book on it, that kind of thing. And so for many of you don't have the time to do it maybe, and sort of thinking about companies, whether it's Forbes books or others out there that can pair you with a ghostwriter, help you think about how to do that. There's a lot of value in that. And it is also a really interesting journey to sit down and work on, kind of taking that framework that you use right now in phase 2 with clients and making it a little bit more universal.
100%. So after all that of building authority, the 3 outcomes that people can get out of it.
Yeah, so the 3 outcomes from building authority, and I'll add a 4th one here as well, but number 1 is lead generation. So we find people want to do business with people they trust and they like, and this is the easiest way and quickest way to do that. Number 2 is ramping up sales conversion. So people that are in the funnel already, again, if you're leading with the business, you're going to have a lower conversion rate than if you're sharing knowledge, than if you're building trust that way. And then the 3rd thing, again, this is the lowest hanging fruit for most of you, is driving more referrals. Okay. We want to refer people to things that make us look good. Meaning, if I've got the best accountant in the world, but I know when somebody Googles my accountant's name, that website looks like their nephew built it in 2001, or the reviews are not great, or whatever it might be, I'm much less likely to refer that person. And so if you can help your audience look good when they refer you, you will generate a lot more referrals from people that already know and love you.
Love it.
And then the 4th one that I'm going to throw in here is just fun. Getting out and teaching, connecting with an audience. I mean, I've met a lot of people today that I haven't been connected with, and love seeing a lot of Longhorn fans here as well.
Yes.
So it's just, it's fun when you do it for the right reasons, and you sort of lean in to ways that you can help people and make an impact. And so what I find for a lot of leaders that, again, initially are kind of arms crossed on personal branding, et cetera, a couple months in, as they start to get feedback, they start to see, okay, this is actually really expanding the impact that I'm having with my audience.
Awesome. Yeah. And I do find that, and apologies for the chat that kind of fell off there, but it will come back on here. I do find that, especially for corporate professionals and leaders, and I'd love to hear if you feel that they may never, ever comment or engage on your posts or your feed, but they're watching. And then you'll end up at dinner with somebody or at an event, and they'll be like, I've been following you for 6 months. And they're like, really? I've never seen you like or comment on any of my posts, right? Do you find that as well?
Oh, there's a ton of lurking that happens, absolutely. Yeah. And again, part of this is just sort of reinforcing the omnipresent side, is just you want people to recognize that you can help in this space, that you can bring a lot of value in this space. And again, it encourages more referrals, it drives more lead flow, and it's fun to do.
Awesome. Okay. The time flies when we're having fun and learning so much, folks. I do want to give a huge shout out. I'm going to post this link to Rusty's book here. It will go into the feed here. It is authoritymarketingbook.com. And Rusty, tell us what they get when they go there. I'm just going to type this in right now.
Yeah, so everybody, just as a thank you for being here today, if you go to authoritymarketingbook.com, courtesy of Forbes Books, we're going to provide you with a free copy of the book, either the digital version or the audio version. You can request which one you want. But if you'll just fill out that information there so we can get a copy of the book to you, it'll go a lot deeper on a lot of what Fanny and I talked about today, and I hope it helps. Hope this has been valuable 100%. To you guys.
100%. Rusty, I could easily talk to you for hours.
Oh, thank you.
But I won't go into it. But so everybody, there is the Authority Marketing book. You can get a free digital copy, like Rusty said, at authoritymarketingbook.com. And also you have another book coming up next year, right?
We do. So the book next year is called The Authority Advantage, Building Thought Leadership Focused on Impact, Not Ego. And we're going to go a little bit more into making a case to leaders that the single most important thing that they can do for their business is help it inspire trust in an environment where their audience no longer trusts the business. And so we're going to look at exactly how to do that and some good modern examples of it. So we're bringing a lot of the stuff from authority marketing and really bringing it into a post-COVID environment.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rusty. Rusty, so many golden moments and nuggets. What would be a final piece of advice you'd like to leave people with?
I would say two things. Number one, thank you for the grace on the couple of hiccups that I had on my connection today.
That's the power of live.
Yeah, for sure. And what I would say for each of you, that is my biggest piece of advice, is to give yourself some grace as you dive in on this. A lot of people go into this and they get a couple of months in and they throw their hands up and just get really frustrated without, they feel like they're not making much progress. And this is one of those things that you're pushing the snowball up the hill, and at a certain point it goes over. But early on, what's really going to power kind of that determination is just, again, leaning into the mission, the why around what you're doing, the impact. And what I find, Fanny, for a lot of people is that powers them to get to the point where, so much of this starts coming inbound. But again, focusing on that strategy that I mentioned earlier, you-driven, news-driven, relationship-driven, I find really accelerates, getting to some of the results that many of you are looking for.
And that was you-driven, news-driven, relationship-driven. There you go, folks. Amazing words to leave you with. Thank you everybody. Thank you, Rusty, for your time and valuable advice. Thank you to my amazing community. You all make the show. You're part of it. Your questions, your comments, we thrive on it. And I do want to kind of end with my parting words. As always, continue to shine your light, share your message, share your gifts, and I hope you'll do it through video and share your message with the world. Thank you, Rusty. Thanks, you, everybody,
Fanny.
in the feed.
Thank y'all.